Common App essay. What does it mean? And how do you write it? The term refers to the personal essay that students must write as part of the college application process. A few colleges do not use the personal essay, very few, in their application process, but most of them require this section. It's typically around a 650-word essay. You choose from a series of prompts, and it's really critical that you use your authentic voice to tell the readers a story that reveals who you are, not what you've accomplished. So this is new to many of you because it's creative writing that does not and should not adhere to the 1-to-1 essay format that most high schools require in your research papers or your English papers. This is creative writing, and it's narrative. So the essay tells your admissions readers a story about who you are as a human being. It's the only, other than supplemental essays, which we'll get to, this is the one place you have a choice of a number of prompts, including the topic of your choice, to tell people what makes you tick and who you are as a person. Everything else is data and school-specific information. You determine your tone, language, format, and topic. Typically, it's casual writing. It's not formal writing. And again, it's all about you and letting admissions know who you are. So things to do. You want to choose your topic carefully. There are some topics that are really common and are overwritten. Sports topics are a bit overdone at this point. The trip topic is also a bit overdone. The community service trip, a lot of how I work so hard to get a good grade in my AP class, no, that's not what you want. So you want to tell the reader who you are, not what you do. Your essay should not be a series of accomplishments. That's in your activity list. So your essay is really, again, it's your authentic voice telling the reader who you are as a person. And then we use the concept called show, don't tell, which means rather than telling the reader information, you want to show it. An example of show, don't tell is, a tell is, I stepped outside and it was cold. A show is, as I opened the door, I was immediately hit by snowflakes. Okay, it was cold. You showed that it was cold, rather than telling that it was cold. You always want to open your essay with a hook. What is a hook? A hook is what grabs your reader's attention and makes them want to read your essay. A hook is critical. Sometimes students come up with it right away. Sometimes it takes you to finish the essay and then you come up with it. And sometimes just in the middle of writing, you go, oh, this isn't a sentence in the essay. This is my hook. So what's an example of a hook? Let's think of a few. I eat so much spam that my friends call me spammy. How's that for a hook? Do you want to read that essay? It sounds a little gross, but it still makes you curious and makes you want to read it. Another one would be, I looked in the bushes and saw two dark eyes peering out at me. So what's in the bushes? The reader is going to want to read on and understand and learn about your story. Critical is to proofread and spell check. It's really important that you do this because every comma counts. Grammar is critical, punctuation is critical, spell check is critical, and it's really easy to make errors with homonyms, using the wrong there instead of there, the wrong we're instead of were. It's very, very easy, and spell check won't catch that. So make sure you read it aloud. I think that's one of the best ways to do it, is to get everything as perfect as possible and then read it aloud to yourself or to a family member, and you'll catch errors that you don't catch when you see it, because frankly, you've been looking at this essay for so long, your eyes really don't see the words after a while. They all sort of blend together. Things to avoid. Don't write on an overused topic. As I mentioned earlier, there are some overused topics like sports, like the community service trip, how I moved to the US and didn't speak English is another very common topic. If you can put a spin on these topics that makes it completely different, then go for it. But otherwise, don't write on what we call tired topics. Something that comes up all the time. Don't repeat the same word or phrase too often. So say you're writing an essay about finding your voice and taking a public speaking class because you were too shy and it allowed you to find your voice and learn to speak in front of people. It's very likely that you will use the word voice many, many times in your first draft of that essay. What you want to do is do a search with Word or just look for it and highlight every single time you repeat the word and use either a synonym or rewrite the sentence so that you don't need the word. So the sort of rule of thumb for word repetition is you never want the same word twice in a sentence. You do not want the same word in consecutive sentences. And ideally, you don't want to repeat the word more than twice in a full-length essay. So that's a rule of thumb to keep in mind. Don't make rookie grammar and punctuation mistakes. I see students try to use colons and semicolons and don't use them correctly. If you're not sure, look it up. There are so many resources that you can look up grammar issues and how to use a colon and semicolon. Commas, I have to say one of the most common errors I see is students not using enough commas. So make sure you understand the use of a comma. Another issue is don't introduce a new idea at the end of your essay. So say you're writing an essay about, let's see, you're writing an essay about your family's meals and how sitting down together as a family is something that you really enjoy and that is a key part of who you are. At the end of the essay, you don't want to say, and I look forward to studying engineering or something random at the end of the essay. You need to have a cohesive essay that has the same topic that flows through it. Finally, you want to avoid asking for too many opinions from family and friends. Everyone has their own ideas as to what you should write about and how you should write it. There's a saying, too many cooks spoil the soup. Well, too many families and friends can spoil the essay and just confuse you. At the end of the day, it's your essay. I really recommend that you limit the number of people who you allow to read it or read it to. Great option is an English teacher to look at it for spelling and punctuation and for ideas. But be really careful about oversharing with family and friends because it's your essay and it's your voice, not theirs. So let's talk about supplemental essays. So what is a supplemental essay? As with the personal essay, you hear this term thrown around. So this essay is a response to a school-specific question. So the school in the Common Application or in Apply Texas or in whatever application you're using, the school automatically has, in a Common App school, it automatically uses the Common App essay. And then the different schools, say you're applying to Stanford. There are a number of Stanford-specific questions that are either short answers, sometimes 25 to 100 words, sometimes they're lists, sometimes they're short essays that are 150 to 250 or 300 words. And then some schools like Cornell have full-length essays that are 650 words or 4 to 650, which is really a full-length, beefy essay. Some schools have a single supplemental question, others have 5 or more, and very few schools do not require supplemental essays. That's when you do the happy dance, when you see a school that does not require a supplemental essay, because it is 1 or 2 or 5 essays that you do not have to write. Trust me, you'll be writing enough that you'll be overjoyed to see a school that doesn't need one. So some common prompts that create your essays. The why X college. This is one of the most common and important supplemental essays and needs to be unique to each school. Do not copy and paste this essay from school to school. That is a kiss of death, because the odds are you will overlook something from one school to the other. You'll leave this wrong school name in the essay and you will totally mess up. And this is a school where you're mentioning classes and different things that you're interested in at that school specifically, so it won't translate into another school. An example, what do you most value about college X? Beyond rankings, location and athletics, why are you interested in college X? So these are examples of common prompts for the why this college essay. Another common essay is why this major or program. You want to prove that you're prepared for the program you are selecting and have to understand why that school's program is the best fit for you. So you want to describe how you plan to pursue your academic interests at College X. Discuss your motivation for studying your selected major at our college. And again, this has to be college specific. If it's YX program, you want to include, if it talks about the program, you want to include some classes. You want to include things that relate to your major. If it's just why this major and not why this major at our school, it is something that you may be able to use for multiple schools. But again, be very careful anytime you recycle an essay. Another common essay is tell us about a community that you grew up in or are currently part of. This shows how you will positively impact the campus environment and how you will fit in within the college's community. An example of some of these prompts: what was the environment in which you were raised? Pick a community you exist within and tell us why it's important to you and how it has shaped you. So these are not school-specific essays because they're about you. While they may be school-specific in that a specific school is asking them, they are not geared towards the school. They are asking about you. The good news about the community essay is you can frequently recycle it. If it's mentioned, if it's asked from college to college, because it's not college specific. Another really common prompt is tell us about your favorite extracurricular activity. Typically, this should be the extracurricular activity that is the #1 activity on your activity list, because you're supposed to write your activity list from your most important activity down. Therefore, we strongly recommend that you focus on your most important activity for the extracurricular essay. And that's another essay that can typically be recycled from school to school. So how to handle all these essays? It's overwhelming, I know, but there is a method to the madness. And this is my suggestion in how to organize these essays. Create a master Word or Google Doc with a page for each school. Write the school's name at the top of each page, and then copy and paste all supplemental essays, including the word count and scholarship or honors college essays, on that school's page. If a school does not have an essay, put the school's name and put in all caps, no essays. So when you're in the thick of things, you don't go, oh my gosh, I forgot to write an essay for X school. And then you look and you see that, okay, that's because X school does not have an essay. And so that's your master Word doc. Then you organize another master document, this time by essay topic. You want to look at the common prompts and themes that repeat, primarily the 4 that I mentioned in the previous slide. You write these essay prompts at the top of 4 pages, and then you copy and paste each school's version of these prompts on that page. And you want to make sure to include the school name and the word count for these essays. So now you have your essays organized by topic, and there are always going to be, beyond those 4 common topics, there are always going to be the outliers. There are going to be some more long, complex essay prompts, Some of the honors college essays are actually quite involved. And so you will have the outliers beyond the four most common essays. Then you want to create a page for the list essays and a page for the short answer responses. So this gives you a great overview of how many essays you have to write and how to schedule your time. This is my suggestion on scheduling your time. I suggest you calendar your writing on whatever type of calendar you use, whether it's your phone, whether it's on your computer. Assign a date and time to work on specific essays. You want to focus, if you're applying early, you want to focus on your early schools first. Long, complex assignments will take multiple drafts where you can write shorter essays in an hour. So plan your calendar based on due dates. Again, as we mentioned, if you're applying early, you want to focus on your early essays. And I suggest that you start writing a tough prompt on a Sunday, put it down, go back to it on Tuesday, write another draft, tweak the draft, put it down, go back to it on Thursday, and then ultimately finish it on Saturday. So it can take you a full week to write a complicated, long essay. And on the days in between, you'll be writing the shorter answers in the list. So all of these should be on your calendar with the school name and the essay so that you know exactly when and what you're going to write. So finally, start writing. You can choose to write by topic or by school, as long as you know which essays repeat. Please don't leave the hard essays until the end of your process. You're going to be worn out. You're going to have writer's block at some point. Don't leave the difficult essays. It's our nature to do the easy ones first, which is why I say start on a Sunday with a difficult one and work on it through the week. And trust me, you'll have more than one difficult essay to work on. So hopefully this helps you get the big picture of how to handle all of these supplemental essays. So let's talk about application forms. There are many types of applications. The Common Application is the most frequently used application. Over 900 public and private colleges and universities use the Common App. And that's what when you hear the Common App, that term, it is referring to the Common Application, an application that is accepted by many, many schools. The Coalition for College is another version of an application similar to the Common App, but slightly different. And only about 150 public and private colleges use the Coalition. More and more schools are going to the Common App and going away from the Coalition, although there are still some schools that are just Coalition. So you may have to do more than one type of application based on your school list. Apply Texas is another app we see a lot. All public and most private Texas colleges and universities are on the Apply Texas application. Apply Texas has its own essay prompts. There's not a, quote, Common App essay. They have their own questions, and they are, in some cases, for UT Austin, for example, school specific. Otherwise, there are general essays that you have to write for all of the Texas schools. So Apply Texas also has an application where you fill out your name, your information, all of your data. Another common application for students who are applying to the University of California system or the California state system is the UC app or the Cal State app. There are 9 UC campuses and 23 Cal State campuses. The UC app requires 4 essays and gives you a lot more space to write your activities in. And the good news about the Cal State apps is they do not require essays. So that's, again, you do your happy dance. There's also the SUNY, the State of New York, or the City of New York, the CUNY app. 57 SUNY campuses and 18 CUNY campuses accept these applications. A little confusing, some SUNY schools are also on the Common App. So what you want to do is look at your schools and see if they give you options for different applications. If you can use the Common App or the Coalition app, use the Common App because you're using it for more schools. University of California is only on the UC app, and as with the Cal States. So some schools, MIT and Georgetown are 2 examples, they have their own application. So does Rutgers. So they're individual school applications. They don't fall into any of these categories. They're not on any master applications. They're standalone applications that are school specific. So how to list your activities. The activities are deceptively challenging, particularly because you have to be incredibly concise. First of all, you list your activities in order of importance to you. Focus on long-term activities or activities that relate to your major, particularly if you're majoring in STEM or engineering. Mention if you founded, were elected to, or selected for an activity. That's how you open the activity. Selected to lead, founded this club, elected by peers. So mention these details because it's really important that colleges know if you were the founder of a club, were elected to, or selected for an activity. Use the position, leadership title, and or the organization name to share as much information as possible. And you want to make sure that any information that you put in the position, leadership title, and organization name is not repeated in the description of your activity, because those are just wasted characters. You want to abbreviate as long as your abbreviation makes sense to the average reader. And for example, instead of with, if you're short on characters, instead of with, you can do W/, and you can use an ampersand for the and you save 2 characters, because you should know that the Common App activity list only allows you 150 characters, including spaces, to describe your activity. And trust me, that is nothing. You can use common acronyms like NASA, CPA, CPR, etc. But if it's not a common acronym, you need to write it out. And that's typically something you would write out in the organization name. You have 100 characters there on the Common App for the organization name. Write out key names and organizations for impact. Again, in the organization name, don't just put basketball team, put Hollywood High School basketball team. You want to make sure that you're clear because it could be a club team, or put the club team's name and they'll know that it's a club team. So you want to write out these key names and organizations for impact. Also, if you're working in a lab and you're a researcher, you have the space to write out the full name of the lab and the university where you're working. Include data in your activities. For example, if you founded a club, how many students are members of the club? If you were a fundraiser, how much money did you raise for a cause? If you're an athlete, include your sports stats. Were you most valuable player? Include your times if you're a swimmer or a runner. So again, data, specific and concise. You do not need to write incomplete sentences. Lists are okay. Just a series of phrases strung together are okay. And again, with the Common App, 150 characters, including spaces, goes by very, very quickly. So the additional information section is something that is in the Common Application and most other applications. What do you include in this section? You want to explain family or health issues that may have negatively impacted your academic performance. So say you lost a family member sophomore year and your grades really dipped. You need to explain, your transcript's going to show the dip in your grades. You really need to explain why that dip happened. And colleges will then understand, oh, he lost a loved one or she lost a loved one and was traumatized by the passing and distracted in school, suffered. You also want to include in this section a description of courses or summer programs that can't be communicated in the activity section. You may have it listed in the activity section, but your 150 character abbreviated description can be expanded upon here in additional information. Now, my caveat is you do not expand on every activity in additional information, only key activities that require extra explanation. If you've written and are publishing a research paper, this is where you put your abstract. If you have some specialized schooling or you're homeschooled, you want to clarify that you're at a magnet school, at a boarding school, that you're homeschooled and why. Some schools have really unusual grading systems. Some grade on a 6-0 scale, some grade on a 5-0 scale, some grade on a 4-0 scale, some grade on a 100-point scale. So if your school's grading system is not the norm, which is typically on a 4.0 scale, you want to explain your school's grading system. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to further elaborate on an activity in your list that cannot be communicated in 150 characters. This is where you can expand it. But again, not every activity, just key activities. This is also where you include links to your websites, your YouTube channels, or any other forms of media that showcase your talent. There is also a section here in additional information, the explanation of disciplinary history. If you have some discipline issues or a history where you were suspended or something happened, this is where you explain it. And it's critical that you fess up to what happened. And we're not talking about a long drawn out essay. We're talking about a concise explanation. All of these points in the additional information section are not creative writing. You're not writing essays. You're writing concise, clear explanations of issues. So how to report testing. Test scores are not always required on the application, especially if your school is test optional. You don't need to put your test scores on the application. So unless otherwise stated, even if you self-report scores on the application, you need to have the test organizations send your official test scores directly to your colleges. It takes about 2 weeks to have your scores sent. And this is something that a lot of students overlook. And if they are submitting their scores, this year's a little different because a lot of schools are test optional due to COVID. But if you are submitting your scores, give yourself time for your scores to arrive by your college deadline. If you have a November 1st deadline, I suggest you send your test scores in October, no later than October 15th, ideally earlier. So make sure that you can get those scores to the school as quickly as possible. So report your highest test score on the application unless otherwise specified. Do not include scores if you plan to apply to test optional schools. So the Common App can be edited from school to school. Say you're applying test optional to one school and you want to submit your test scores to another. You submit your application without test scores to the test optional school, and then you go back into the Common App and you add your test scores and submit your application to the next school that requires your test scores. So you can change the Common App and tweak it from school to school. So we recommend submitting test scores, even if a school's test optional, if your scores fall within or above the average test score range of admitted students. And that's something you can find on the school website. So this is critical. If it's a test optional school and you've taken a test, but your scores are much lower or in the 25th percentile of the school's accepted students, do not report your test. And again, this is for test optional schools. AP testing. You want to include your AP test scores if you did well on tests. Typically 3 or above, scores of 3 or higher should be reported. And then you want to mention the AP test that you will take in May of your senior year. So students who are completing the application now are putting their current AP classes, so their past AP classes with the scores, their current AP classes with a test date of 05-2021. What this does is it allows schools to see all of the AP classes you've taken in one location. And it's really impressive, particularly if you've taken a number of APs. Do I have to answer that question? Some students are not comfortable sharing personal specifics. If you're one of these students, you will not be penalized for skipping these questions. If there is a red asterisk on the question in the common application, it means you must answer it. If there's not a red asterisk, you do not need to answer it. Ethnicity is something you have the option to answer or not. Religious preference, you can state that or not. Gender identity, it's your call whether you want to state that or not. There are a few personal questions that you are required to answer. And sometimes you really need your parents' help. Your parents' occupation and employment status, their highest level of education, and the schools that they attended. If you plan on applying for financial aid, you need to include your Social Security number. And that's something that's critical that you let schools know if you're going to apply for financial aid on the application. So that sums up the essay and application presentation. And now we'll take any questions that you all have, and I'm sure there are quite a few. So I'm going to wait to hear them from Emily, and we will go from there.
Thanks, Julia. We actually had some sound issues right at the beginning that I didn't want to interrupt you on. So would you mind going back to the very first slide, the what is a personal statement slide, and going through those bullets again, just to cover for, I think you were, there was some audio difficulties during that one slide.
Okay, what is a personal statement?
Yeah, just to make sure you can recap everything for everyone, and then we'll get to questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so a personal statement is a term that you all hear thrown around. Have you written your personal statement? Are you writing your personal statement? Some people call it the Common App essay. It can be called the personal essay. And what it is, it's the personal essay that students must write as part of the college application process. It is an essay that goes to all of your schools. So it accompanies your application to every school. A few colleges do not use the personal essay in their application process, but most, I would say 99.9%, require this essay. You want to use your authentic voice to tell the readers a story that reveals who you are, not what you've accomplished. You do not want to write an essay that basically restates your activities or states your resume. You're telling a story. It's creative writing. It's a narrative. And it's the only way that colleges get to know who you are as a person and really what makes you tick. So it's creative writing, which a lot of high school students are not accustomed to. And it does not and should not adhere to the traditional 1-2-1 essay format that most high schools require with traditional essays. Intro, 2 paragraphs, conclusion. That is not how you write your Common App essay. It's a narrative. It's more free-form writing. You can have a 2-sentence paragraph if you want to. You can include dialogue. It's whatever you want it to be. But don't go all sort of out there and write a poem. I recommend that you write it as an essay. So the essay tells your admissions reader a story about who you are as a human being. All the other information in the application is limited and structured. It's data, activities, school-specific supplemental essays, which I covered. And it's basically unemotional information. Your Common App essay or your personal essay is something that conveys who you are with emotion by you telling a story in your authentic voice. You determine your tone, language, format, and topic. In most cases, sometimes your topic is determined for you. But determining your tone, language, format, and topic, typically you use casual, not formal English when you're writing this because you're telling a story. So it's up to you to determine how you want to tell your story. Does that cover it, Emily?
I think it does. If we missed anything else, you guys can drop that in the chat box if you'd like us to recover anything on the other slides. So we've gotten a couple questions throughout that I'll throw your way. First, starting with essays. How important is sentence structure in an essay?
It must be you need to use proper sentence structure. So it is very important. You need to use commas, you need to use semicolons, you need to use correct grammar. Sentence structure is critical. You do not want sentence fragments. So sentence structure, you can't do free-form writing. You can do a free-form essay, however, you still have to write with proper sentence structure and format.
Thank you. And we've gotten a question about specific topics, so I'll throw those out there as well. So do you feel like it's appropriate to use something about like maybe a little more controversial, such as religion, as a hook in an essay to get a reader interested in the topic?
It really depends. You have to be careful because you don't know your reader. You don't know their background. You don't know their belief system. So I don't recommend that you write about anything that is too opinionated, political, religious, or controversial. If it's writing about your belief in your religion and your practices in your religion and how that forms you as a person, by all means write it. However, if you're bashing religion or saying that everyone should be religious, no, that's not appropriate in this essay.
Thank you for clarifying that. We have one question in response to the last question about sentence structure. Could you give an example of casual English and what that might sound like?
Okay, oh boy, put me on the spot to write in my mind. Casual English would be, you can use contractions for one thing. So let's see. So, oh my goodness, casual English. Em, you can help me if you want to. I walked into the room and saw my brother Sam working on his computer. Casual. More formal would be, as I entered the room, I noticed that my brother was working on his computer. It's a little more formal. So narrative is more telling a story, whereas formal English is more of the not appropriate, but the sentence structure is a little more formal and your language is more formal. I hope that covers that. That was a tough one.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that, tone is preferential for the student. So some students naturally speak in a bit more formal tone and therefore write in a bit more formal tone. And some students speak in a more casual tone, therefore they write in a casual tone. The important thing when you're thinking about the way you're writing your essay is to not try to be something that you're not, to not try to be overly colloquial or formal in your writing and not try to make it sound too relaxed or too cool if that's not the way that you naturally write, because it's going to come across in a way that doesn't sound authentic to the reader, which is the most important part.
Absolutely. It's all about using your authentic voice.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on, a hot topic that students feel like they're being told to not write about right now is the pandemic. So what's your take on writing about the pandemic this year in college essays?
There is the Common App has a COVID question in the additional information section. And that is COVID specific. If your life has been impacted by COVID in any way, if your grades are impacted by COVID, if the way that the AP tests were given due to COVID impacted your score, that's what you put in the COVID section. And it is a COVID specific question. However, I do not think that it's a great idea to write an entire essay about COVID, because my guess is there are going to be thousands of COVID essays. It will be the most common topic of the year, and you do not want to write about a common topic. However, my caveat is, if you are somehow uniquely impacted by COVID, if you got COVID, or if someone in your family did and it impacted you personally, you want to tell that story of the drama and the trauma that you went through, you can. But don't just write about staying home or doing virtual school due to COVID. So I would say for the most part, avoid it and just address whatever you need to in the COVID question in the Common Application.
Julia. We had a question come through that was very specific to a situation, but I want to make sure we address it and it gets answered as well. So somebody let us know that they came from an abusive family and ended up leaving their home about a little over almost a year and a half ago. And they'd like to write about that if possible, but they want to know how to write about it in a way that doesn't come across as a sob story or just maybe like a list of all the negative aspects and things that happened.
Okay, well, first of all, whoever you are, I'm very sorry you were in that situation and were forced to leave your home. My heart goes out to you. So you can write it by telling a story, but you don't want to put in too many gory details. Enough detail that the reader understands the abusive situation, but you don't need to include a play-by-play of the abuse. And I think knowing that you moved on and you moved in with another family shows redemption on your end, that you took matters into your own hands and helped yourself out of a really bad situation. So I suggest you focus on the change rather than the actual abuse. Clearly, it has to be included in your opening because it's the background for the essay, but focus more on the positive side once you shifted to a new home and how much more positive that home was. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Julia. Do you have any tips on how to show instead of tell when you're writing an essay?
So imagine, again, I gave you a brief example. Showing is using creative dialogue or creative text to explain something that you would otherwise just say in a boring, straight sentence. So an example of a tell is I walked into the room and heard the saxophone player blaring on his saxophone. A show would be I stepped into the dark club and was immediately overwhelmed by the sound of the soulful saxophone. Do you see how those are different? You're showing the reader, you want to incorporate all of your five senses when you're showing. You can use taste, smell, sound, sight, touch. Any of those senses that you incorporate help you show, because what it does is it brings the reader into the story and they identify with you. We can all then see the dark club and hear that saxophone playing rather than just walking in and hearing a saxophone, which is, they'll just cruise right past that sentence. They'll read it, but it won't have an impact on them. So the best way to show is to incorporate one of your senses, because if you incorporate, for example, the sense of smell of your mom's spaghetti sauce cooking on the stove, we all know what that smells like, and your reader's going to know what it smells like, and it will connect them immediately with you and with your essay.
Perfect. Last question that's come through on essays, and then I'll move into some other topics until we get more on essays. Now, this question came from an attendee, and unfortunately, there's not a clear-cut answer to the question. The question is, what is the best essay topic? And there's not an answer to that. It's dependent on your experiences as a student. So unfortunately, we can't answer that question. But would you want to speak to a little bit to kind of the process of maybe like choosing an essay topic and how to go through that as a student?
Sure. You can start, particularly if you're working with the Common App or the Coalition app, start by reading their prompts. There are prompts for you to choose from. And I believe there are 6 on the Common App. I'm not sure how many there are on the Coalition. And then there is topic of your choice, which is sort of your free write. Sometimes you can get a topic inspiration from reading a prompt. Talk about an obstacle that you've overcome, how you overcame it, and what you did to change your life. I don't remember the Common App prompts specifically. I should at this point. But starting with a prompt can frequently inspire you and sort of trigger your mind to write an essay. Another thing I suggest is that you keep a journal with a series of memories. I call it a memory journal. And what you do is over time, when anything happens to you in a given day that just sort of, clicks in your mind like, oh, that was interesting, write it in your memory journal. And over time, say, 3 nights a week, you sit and you think about your week, and you say one day you had an interesting bus ride home and spoke to someone new, and learned something about them and something about yourself. If you write bus ride home in your memory journal, you're going to go back, it will jog your memory. So over time, you'll have a series of potential topics in this journal, and you can then look at them and highlight those that you think have the most potential and start free writing a couple of them and see what comes most naturally. I think that's the key, is choose the topic that comes naturally, that does not feel.
Perfect, thank you. Moving into the activities, how many activities should a student list in their application?
So the Common Application allows 10 activities. And if you have 10 activities, absolutely list them. If you have 5 activities, list 5. But do not skip an activity because you don't think it's important. If you don't have 10, you can include hobbies, you can include jobs, you can include volunteer information. There are all sorts of things. Activities don't have to be school-sanctioned extracurricular activities. You can be an artist who paints at home on your own. That's an activity. You can be someone who's learning how to play the guitar on their own. That's an activity. You can babysit for your siblings when your parents are at work. That's an activity. So open your mind to what an activity is, and ideally you'll have 10. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world, because we don't all have that many activities. So do the best you can to come up with 10 key activities. And if you overflow and run out of space, you can also put additional activities in that additional information section. But again, not a full resume, just a few additional things that didn't fit. So ideally, you'll fill the 10, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world by any means.
Thank you. Is it better, speaking of activities, to pursue passion projects or research, or do you think that club leadership roles look better than kind of exploratory things like passion projects or research?
I think your major. If you're going, again, I spoke about engineering briefly. If you're going into something like engineering that is very major specific, I suggest that you pursue things that show demonstrated interest in that major, like research, like summer programs, or summer courses that focus on that area. Otherwise, passion projects are fine, because again, they show who you are and what makes you tick. So students talk about well-rounded or pointy with activities. You are who you are. At this point, if you're a senior, your activities are done, right? You're either in the process of doing existing activities, maybe starting a new one, but you're primarily looking in the past. So there's not much that you can do to change the activities. If you're a freshman or a lower classman, and you want to focus on architecture, engineering, nursing, potentially medicine, I suggest that you focus some of your activities in those areas, because again, it shows demonstrated interest in the field. So the reality is you'll have a combination of passion and more specific and career directed or major directed activities.
Thank you. How do you explain an activity ending maybe, a year or 2 years more abrupt than a student would prefer due to something that's outside of their control? This specific question was because sponsor or coach ended up leaving the school, but I could also see this being due to reduced funding or lack of general interest, something like that. So how would a student explain that?
You explain that in the additional information section. What you do is say, say you were in robotics for 2 years and then the club disbanded because they lost funding. You want to say in the additional information section, just as a little bullet point, please note that my robotics activity was discontinued after 2 years due to lack of funding. And that explains that you didn't just drop robotics, but robotics no longer existed at your school. So again, use that additional information section. It's really important and it comes in very handy.
Thank you. We've got one more question that came in about essays. So if there are any remaining questions, if you guys will go ahead and send those in the chat box, we'll try to get through as many as we can in the couple minutes we have remaining. The last question regarding essays is a little bit general. So this person might want to add more context to this question in the chat box if we don't quite answer it the way you're looking for. The question is it necessary to be expressive in your essays? Do you want to try to answer that, Julia?
Sure. I think expressive goes along with show, don't tell. So the more expressive you can be, the better. I mean, you don't want an entire essay of emotion and of show. Your essay has to have a balance. But I think that the show, don't tell will really cover that question. The more you show, the more you'll cover it.
Thank you. We had another question come in about activities. How important is it to find or be involved in a nonprofit or like cause club? I think we could also go the volunteering route there. How important is that aspect of activities?
It's very important. Every student should have some community service in their activity list. It's never too early to start. Sometimes you can do it through clubs at school. Sometimes you do it independently, but community service is critical. Thank you for asking that question because it's something that I didn't bring up in the activity discussion. Right now with COVID, it's very difficult to do community service in person. However, there are a number of opportunities that are virtual, so you can do virtual service. But community service is a critical activity to have, and the earlier you start, the better. However, to the seniors, it's never too late to start either. You can start now, even if you don't have any on your application at this point. You can start a community service activity right now.
Thanks, Julia. All right, I don't see any other questions through, so I think we are all done for this evening unless anything last minute comes through. But yeah, I think you did a great job, and thank you so much for presenting this evening.
You're so welcome. Thank you everyone for attending and for bearing with me with sound issues that I wasn't aware of. And have a wonderful afternoon and evening. And we look forward to hearing from you if you have any additional questions. I believe this will be broadcast live on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it again on YouTube because it will be archived. So that's something that you'll be able to find. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. We really appreciate it.
Julia, we did have a couple questions come in while that was happening. So I'm going to throw a couple your way since we've still got 2 minutes left. Let's see. Is it okay if you can't participate at summer school due to finances or due to lack of awareness of an event? I would assume that's in reference to college prep summer programs. Is it okay not to do one of those?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you should know, never ever hesitate to ask if a program has financial aid. Even if they don't list financial aid, ask. Call the summer program and ask if they offer financial aid, because most of the time they will, and they may not list it on their site. So expensive activities are not necessary. You can do classes on edx.org or on coursera.org that are either free or very low cost, and those are equally important. They show that you're doing independent studies and enrichment. that cost next to nothing or nothing.
Perfect. And another one, do you need to include extracurricular activities if you ended up migrating from another country? So would you include extracurricular activities from, non-US schools?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to include everything from 9th through 12th grade, wherever you were. What you don't want to include is anything from middle school. I frequently see students mention an activity that they did in 7th grade. That's not appropriate. High school, and no matter where you were in high school, you were involved in an activity. It counts as an activity. So absolutely include it.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and end on this one, which isn't quite a question we can answer. So I'll go ahead and answer it for you, Julia. We have received a question, is USC a good school? That would depend on which USC you're talking about in reference to your own, what you think is a good school. So there are 2 USCs, University of Southern California and the University of South Carolina. Good school is a very relative term. It depends on what you're looking for. What I would encourage you to do is check out their website. Do they have programs that you're interested in? Look at the curriculum for those programs. Make sure that is a good fit for you. Also academically, kind of look at what types of students are they admitting? Does that seem like a good fit for you? And is it a target school? Does it align with your test scores? If you're planning on taking tests, does it align with your GPA? So consider that when you're thinking about what might be a good school. There's no right or wrong answer for a good school. It's what's a good fit for you personally.
Right. It's all about fit.
Yep. And with that, I think we'll call it a night. So thank you so much for presenting. Thank you everybody for attending and for asking great questions.
Thank you everyone. And thank you, Emily, for being such an awesome moderator.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Good afternoon for those of you who are in the West. Bye-bye.